next two videos, we're going to take a more comprehensive look at creating freeze mask or freeze selections in 3D Coat's voxel sculpting environment. It's important to note that when you're in voxel mode, you do not have a freeze brush or freeze tool available to you. You need to switch to surface mode in order to utilize this tool. Okay. With that said, in the E panel, you can choose a regular brush mode if you want to apply your selection that way. You can also use any one of these marquee selection types. You can also bring the E panel directly to you instead of reaching up here all the time. So I'll do that, and I'll choose the close spline tool. If you're working in an area like the eye region, you have natural skin folds, so this is one particular application you'll find yourself using it quite often. It allows you to kind of build up skin folds overlapping one another if you need. The escape key to finish the initial state of the spline, and I can always go in and modify the points after the fact. And right click to change the point type. I want to harden these here, and when I'm happy with the shape of the spline, I can hit the enter key to apply the freeze mask. I can save this shape if I want to be able to get back to it. But I want to bring up the freeze panel here by just dragging it. When you have this little move icon, you can just click and drag. And you can unfreeze here. You can invert the freeze selection here as well. And these hotkeys are the exact same as you have in Photoshop, so it's very easy to remember. Whenever you create a mask selection in Photoshop, you can undo that selection by hitting Control D. You can invert it by hitting Control Shift I. So it's exactly the same here. You can also smooth this mask or free selection. You can sharpen it. You can hide it. You can expand it a little if you like. I'm going to hide this, or go ahead and get out of this spline here by hitting the escape key. And so I may see that I want to expand it just a little bit. And the time it takes to calculate this depends on the density of your model. Okay, so you go back to a regular brush. And so yeah, I can check invert tool to actually erase the mask, or hold down the control key. You could use steady stroke as well. Hold down the control key. Okay, so let me go ahead now and switch to just a regular brush. Let's choose expand, which is essentially the same as inflate. May not need steady stroke on for this, so uncheck it. So I can check unfreeze all here, or Control D. Okay, so there's that. Let's now look at another method of creating freeze selections. If you go to the Stencils palette, you can access different folders with different images inside them to create a freeze mask overlay. Let me adjust it. You also have a 2D gizmo. So click here in the middle, move it. Again, click this little rotate widget, move it, scale it globally or uniformly, or kind of skew it. And I can even right click on this little dot once again. And one nice feature is the ability to distort this mask selection here. I'm going to reduce my brush size a bit. And mask by default tiles. Now, one little tip is stamps used to be called materials, and it allows you to choose color, depth, and specularity maps, and you can use that to paint with in the paint room, but you can also use it to sculpt with as well. So it works very similar to mask, and with that you can actually turn tiling off So you could access the same image here in stamps, but with stencils, currently there's not an option to turn that off. But still, you can distort your image, and you can save it and reload it later. You can even paint over this stencil if you need. Okay, and then go back to paint. I can invert this mask here as well, and I'm going to switch to a different brush here, to the gum brush, and it's very good for working on very fine surface details like skin cracks, pores, wrinkles, and so on. And these other tools are more for roughing out or sculpting out your forms as opposed to sculpting details. So we don't want our depth to be too much. Let's try maybe about 3 or 4. And then I'll close that mask out. Undo a few times here. So I'll click on this once again and I'll bring it back to its normal mode there. But what I wanted to show is you don't just have this 2D plane here that you're working through. You can actually choose something like cube mapping, and it appears initially that it's not working, but it actually is. You just need to make some adjustments and you'll see it live as you make these modifications here. Okay, and you rotate it as well, move it, and so on. And you'll see a little preview right under your cursor as well. So let's go to freeze, and instead of sculpting through this stencil, you can choose to use this to paint a freeze selection. And the reason why you might want to do this is because you've got more editing ability if you create a freeze selection. So let me scale that up. And if I see a seam, then I can always smooth it out. Now if I hold the Shift key, see, that's a bit too dramatic, but what I need to do is just reduce the smoothing value. So I'm going to undo, hold the Shift key, right click and drag until my smoothing value or intensity is down quite a bit. Okay, and then I can smooth that seam between 2 different sizes of scales or whatnot. I can even lighten this up if I need. I'm going to right click and drag all the way down with the Control key. Okay, and I probably want to completely redo this. Maybe try a different pattern here. Crank my value up a bit. Okay, and so this is much more forgiving than trying to sculpt and then realize later on that it, maybe it was a little bit too dramatic or too drastic. Okay, so with that done, let's go ahead and go back to our gum brush here, and I'm going to exit out of this mask, and I'll hold the Control key so it embeds. One other thing I can do is at the very bottom of your tool panel, when you're in surface mode, click Smooth All, and you can use relaxation or tangent smooth, but what I want to get at here is you can choose invert freeze and it's going to smooth what you have frozen. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to crank up the smoothing degree. I'll choose relaxation. Hit OK. Then Control D to deselect that freeze mask. Okay, so we'll stop right here in this video, but in the next one we're going to pick up in the paint room and use some of its tools there to apply even more specialized freeze selections. So stay tuned and we'll see you in the next video.